Jaden Daniel and Terry McLaurin are out, and plenty more injuries are only figured out on Fridays. And that's exactly why we wait till every Friday to go through every matchup to find the must start and sit defenses of the week. So we're doing that for week 4 fantasy football, and I'm one of the only fantasy YouTubers who covers defense on a weekly basis. So please go down there and drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now get into our first matchup. It is the matchup overseas. The Minnesota Vikings and the Pittsburgh Steelers play each other in Ireland this week. Now, I think that both these defenses are very playable in this game. Look, we're talking about two defenses here that are able to generate turnovers, and one of them in particular that I just think is a fantastic defense that's led by a tremendous defensive coordinator, Brian Flores. So I would definitely prefer Minnesota's defense over the Steelers because this defense, I think, is just the better defense overall. They're also dealing with less injuries to their defense than the Pittsburgh Steelers are. The Steelers defense is dealing with injuries on the back end and on the front end as well. Now, they're definitely capable of making turnovers happen, the Steelers defense. So I would say that Carson Wentz being the starting quarterback again, probably not the best thing for Minnesota's offense. It is probably better than JJ though. But just for the fact that Carson Wentz is not some great quarterback, I do think the Steelers defense is very playable in this game. And I would say the same about the Vikings defense playing the Pittsburgh Steelers offense overseas. Look, I don't know what to expect, honestly, from either offense or really either defense. But I do think that both offenses look shaky to the point where when they go overseas, I want to take advantage of that matchup, just plain and simple. So Aaron Rodgers overseas, I do want to take advantage of that matchup as well and play the Minnesota Vikings. Just one spot currently in my rankings above the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they're both great plays. The next matchup is the Washington Commanders at the Atlanta Falcons, and the Commanders remain a must start, but I will say it's not my favorite. Like, they're still at number 12 in my defense rankings this week. I do still think they're a good play because we just saw too much grossness with the Atlanta Falcons offense last week that I don't really know how they correct just 1 week later. Like, it's not just Michael Penix, and he was bad. It's not just Drake London not doing well. It's the play calling, man. I mean, the play calling is so atrocious and so egregiously bad that I just don't see them doing much, moving the ball compared to last week, because it's not like this is like a worse matchup. I mean, the Commanders defense isn't particularly strong either. They've got injuries on the back end as well, but Atlanta has every opportunity to right the ship, so I don't love the Commanders defense this week. But that being said, they did fine last week against the Raiders offense, and the Falcons offense, you could take advantage of them right now. And I'm not going to play the Falcons even with the news of Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels both being out in this game. Yes, of course it makes an impact, but this team just put up 40 plus points on the Raiders last week without Terry McLaurin for the majority of it and Jaden Daniels for the entirety of that game. So I do think that the Falcons defense, as bad and disgusting as they looked last week against the Carolina Panthers, it's just really hard for me to be able to say that this is some top tier defense that's going to stop the Commanders. I did consider them moving them up. I haven't done so yet. So maybe they could get into in a pinch territory where if you really are low on defenses, they could be played. I'm not there yet, though, and that's why I would say I would sit them right now. The Los Angeles Chargers at the New York Giants is our next matchup, and of course the Chargers are a great start. I keep saying this, Jackson Dart is getting a brutal start to his career. I think this is a really bad situation. They should have just put him out there in week 1 if they knew Russell Wilson wasn't going to do anything for them right away. But they didn't do that. And therefore, Jackson Dart comes into one of the worst situations possible. It's not that the Chargers defense doesn't have their own problems. They do, by the way. They're injured on both ends of the defense, the front end and the back end. But at the same time, man, the Chargers are overcoming lots of injuries this year so far. And the Giants offense, just realistically, with Jackson Dart in his first game, I don't expect much better than we saw last week, for example, with the Chiefs. And I know that's rich because Russell Wilson can't throw, but seriously, I don't think that this offense is going to be able to take advantage of a well-coached team. And the Giants, on the other hand, there's just no way I'm playing them. I mean, the Chargers offense is just freaking moving right now. There's no other way to handle this one other than to put the Giants on the bench. The Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans this week, and listen, I think they're both playable as well. Houston's defense is still my favorite because we've seen a couple different combinations, right? Like Houston's defense is not the problem of their team. They actually do have a strong defense. It's very physical. It's very tough. They create turnovers. Like they can get after quarterbacks and make plays really hard and lives really hard for opposing offenses. That's not the problem here. Obviously, the problem is Houston's offense being on the field for very little time, making their defense really hard to, get well rested for as the game goes on. But Cam Ward at the same time, like he doesn't look good either. So it's not like that this is a complete mismatch offensively for the Titans compared to the Texans. Like this is a good matchup for both teams because both offenses aren't very good. So to be clear, I'll definitely play the Texans over the Titans, but I do think the Titans are a solid play this week as well. I think their defense is much better than the fantasy production has been this year. They're a bottom 5 fantasy defense, but that's because they've played 2 really tough opponents, Denver and the Los Angeles Rams, and they also played the Indianapolis Colts last week. Like they've had some tough stretches here against really good offenses in the league. This is not one of them. And the Tennessee defense does have dudes, particularly up front. So I do think Tennessee's defense is going to be a surprise decent play this week, but not a surprise, of course, if you watch my channel. And I'll say this also. This is the perfect defense to pick up if you're still looking for a defense this week using our automatic waiver wire tool. Because what happens is every week there's a mad dash for priority waiver wires. And as soon as those priority waiver wires run out, everybody's trying to get the remaining players at like the middle of the night. There's always a mad dash after that. Well, the Titans aren't going to be a priority ad, so make sure you lock up that pick by using our automatic waiver wire tool. And while you're at it, go create a start-sit poll to help address some of your start-sit concerns on our site for free, by the way.
This is Ted. Look at him. Ted desperately needs to pick up a new running back, or his fantasy team is toast. For the 3rd year in a row. And losing his season again means one thing.
Oh, no.
Don't be Ted. Use Fantasy Football Roundup to automate your waiver pickups and take a breather this season.
You got 7 more laps.
Now, the next matchup is the Philadelphia Eagles at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think the Philadelphia Eagles is a solid play this week. They were actually just outside of my top 13 for a couple different reasons. Number one, we know the Philadelphia Eagles defense is really good. I mean, they've definitely let up on points this year. They've lost personnel last year. I think it's just going to take a little time for them to get up to speed with some of those younger players, but they have tons of potential and tons of talent. So you can't overlook the Eagles defense regardless of who they're playing. And obviously the Bucs offense is potent when everybody's there, but we don't have everybody. Evans is out, Baker's banged up, Emeka Egbuka's banged up, and Chris Godwin may return to this game, but he is going to be significantly hampered in his first game back. I refuse to believe that he's going to come in immediately and see what we saw last year from Chris Godwin for the majority of the time he was out there. I think they're significantly hampered this week, and therefore I think the Philadelphia Eagles can hold them to 14, 17 points and maybe get a pick or two off of Baker if he's desperate and making big plays. I think that's very possible. So the Eagles, to me, they're my number 13 defense, and I'm going to keep them there, and I think they're a solid play. And I think the Bucs, on the other hand, you can't play them because this offense against Philadelphia, listen, even when they were down, they just reshifted their whole mentality to we have to throw the ball to A.J. Brown, and they were able to storm back and win the game. Like, this offense is so multi-dimensional that, yes, they're a run-first team, but even if the Bucs get out to an early lead in this game, the Philadelphia Eagles are not going to be contained offensively. They just won't be. They're that good offensively. So I think the Bucs defense is already not a good one that you don't want to play. They gave up 20 points offensively to the Jets last week. You don't want to play them against the Eagles, that's for sure. The Carolina Panthers at the New England Patriots is our next matchup, and I did include the Patriots inside of my top 12 this week. Listen, their defense actually has sneaky been a good one in fantasy, and it's because they're getting after the quarterback. They've got a lot of quarterback pressures, a lot of sacks. They're getting big plays. It's very, very possible that they do that again against Bryce Young and company, especially when you factor in that all of his pass catchers, not one of them, is not injured. Xavier Legette is out. Jatavian Sanders is out. They have Tommy Tremble at tight end, and then they've got a banged-up Tet McMillan who's going to play, but he's banged up as well. So they have Chuba Hubbard and Ted McMillan. That's basically it. And Bryce Young at quarterback. I don't see how it's not a good start. And I would also say this, the Panthers defense actually was close to playable, flexible territory, but I do think that I'm going to sit them out because the Patriots, while they aren't looking fantastic offensively, they can move the ball. And they can get in the end zone. All they need to do is clean up the turnovers from last week. But realistically, you've got to give the Steelers defense some credit. And I'm talking to myself because I struggle doing that with them sometimes. But the Steelers defense does deserve some credit because they can generate turnovers, unlike a lot of defenses can. So the Panthers, I'm not going to play them this week because their defense just isn't as good as the Steelers defense at making turnovers happen. The New Orleans Saints at the Buffalo Bills, and this feels like a relatively obvious one that I don't need to spend much time on. The Bills are a must-start defense because they're playing the New Orleans Saints, and the Saints are a must-sit defense because they're playing the Buffalo Bills. So let's move on. The Cleveland Browns at the Detroit Lions, and on the surface, right, I would say that this is a similar situation where it's like really obvious, but at the same time, if you look at what the Browns did last week, there's people that legitimately are questioning, like, were the Browns defense that good last week? Or was it a fact of Green Bay just not hitting on plays that they usually would? And I'll be honest, I've watched that game this week, and I don't know what to think. I can see both sides. The Browns defense did look good, and the Packers offense at the same time did miss throws, particularly with Love, that he wouldn't normally miss. So I don't know what to think. But I do know what to think about this matchup. I think that this Browns defense can't be played because they're playing the Lions offense, who looks eerily similar to last year, and I was very wrong on that front. John Morton has done very well for the Lions. You cannot play the Browns defense, even if they actually turn out to be good. I'll have them on the bench. And then the Lions defense, I'm going to play them as well because the good thing with Cleveland is they're not putting up many points, and they're also turning the ball over. Like, every defense that plays the Browns is must start. I get it. Last week was a shocker. The Packers defense wasn't as good as they could have been, but they still got turnovers off of Flacco because that's what can happen. And they don't score many points. The Lions defense, the way they looked last week against the Ravens, is absolutely a must start. Our next matchup is the Jacksonville Jaguars at the San Francisco 49ers, and neither one of these defenses is must start. I will say the 49ers defense is definitely playable, though. And listen, the reason they're not in must start territory is because Joey Bosa is now down, along with 10,000 other players in San Francisco. I said it earlier this week, and I'll say it again. That doctor in San Francisco, he needs to be investigated. This team just gets injury after injury for years now, and I don't think it's a coincidence. The 49ers defense, though, is playable because Robert Saleh is a really good defensive coordinator. He has completely revamped and reshifted that defense's mentality to alpha dogs. So I want this defense in a lot of lineups when I'm in particularly deeper leagues and I don't have the advantage of going after one of my top 12 defenses that I listed earlier. So I think the 49ers are playable, but the Jags are not playable barely. And I think the Jags defense has actually low-key been a little solid this year. I'm still not going to trust it now that we're going to get Brock Purdy back. Ricky Pearsall is going to be there. Jawan Jennings might be there, and McCaffrey is healthy. So this offense, there's just too many pieces that I don't trust them to shut down. So I'm going to sit the Jags defense this week. The Indianapolis Colts at the Los Angeles Rams is our next matchup, and the Rams defense is playable. I continue to say this. I am going to be a Daniel Jones doubter until after this week. If Daniel Jones comes in and plays really well, then I will stop doubting him because we'll have 4 weeks now. And that's a big chunk of the season right there. That's a quarter of the season, basically. So I'm going to put my doubt on Daniel Jones again against the Rams, who I view as a very good defense. So I think the Rams defense, they've just had a couple tough stretches with good matchups here. And I just think that this is a matchup that they could take advantage of if we see old Daniel Jones, which, again, I expect that we will see at some point. And the Colts defense on the same time, like, they've actually been really good in fantasy as well. But I'm just not going to play them against the Rams. They have all their pieces. Devontae Adams is going to play in this game. I know he's questionable, but according to Sean McVay, he's expected to go. So I don't see this as like a matchup that's like, oh yeah, they can take advantage. There's some holes I could poke here for the Rams offense. I don't see that. I think the Colts defense is going to be a not great play this week, and I don't think that the Rams make enough mistakes to make up for the amount of points that they probably will give up in this game in Los Angeles because they're traveling across the country to face this team. Now, our next matchup is the Chicago Bears at the Las Vegas Raiders, and also, I think the Bears are a playable defense too. The Bears defense is not in my top 12, They have not entered into it, but they're very close. They're like right there at that 14 to 15 range. Because this defense is solid. Like it last week against the Dallas Cowboys, they looked good. They made big plays. Now they have injuries, and that's the reason they're not in the top 12, because the Raiders matchup is in theory a good one. Geno Smith throws interceptions, and this offensive line is abysmal in Las Vegas. So there's opportunity here for the Bears to have a really good game, and they're very, very playable this week. They're very much on the border of my top 12, and if it weren't for injuries, they would be in the top 12. Now, the Raiders defense, on the other hand, I can't envision playing them after the disaster that we saw last week. When I said they were a playable defense because Jaden Daniels was out, oh my gosh, what an embarrassment. For 2 years straight now, the Raiders defense has embarrassed me. They're back in my doghouse. And realistically, like taking emotion out of the equation, just look at the Bears, right? Their offense looked so good last week. They're rolling into this week with momentum, and it's not a good defense that they're playing. I don't see how it goes a bad way for the Bears offense against this kind of defense this week. The Baltimore Ravens at the Kansas City Chiefs, I think, is probably the most tricky matchup of the week. I think both defenses are playable because if you look at Kansas City's history against Lamar Jackson, they know how to play him better than everybody else, basically besides the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's no team that's been better at shutting down Lamar's strengths than the Chiefs and the Steelers. And the Chiefs are in this position right now to where I could see them limiting Baltimore to 14 or 17 points. Now, given the Chiefs offense and their weaknesses as well, I think the Ravens are playable too. And I know that sounds bizarre after watching the Ravens last week. And they've got lots of injuries up front. Like that whole front seven basically is banged up. They got bullied last week because of that. But realistically, man, the Chiefs offense just doesn't look nearly as potent as the Lions. So I don't see that the Chiefs are going to put up 20 plus, 30 plus points in this game. I think it's a 17 to 14 type of game. And I think both defenses are playable, but I would play the Ravens if I had the choice because of the lack of firepower in Kansas City's offense. Now, the Sunday night matchup is the Green Bay Packers at the Dallas Cowboys, and the Packers defense is definitely a must play. If Dak and CD were both there, I would say, no, it's not a must play necessarily, but I would still have them inside my top 15 for sure. Packers defense is just too good, right? I mean, there's Jerry Jones is still talking crap about Micah Parsons coming back and playing him. It's like, there's so much bulletin board material here for the Packers alone, and they don't have CD Lamb. Like, there's just no way the Packers won't be a good play. Micah Parsons wants to play good football in front of this team that just gave him away to the Packers. I think the Packers defense is already good, but you add on Micah Parsons with that extra bulletin board information from Jerry Jones, yeah, I don't see how the Packers are not a good defensive play this week. And the Cowboys, there's just no way on God's green earth that I am playing this defense right now. Bottom line, end of story. Let's move on. The New York Jets at the Miami Dolphins is our first Monday night game, and I got to tell you, I hate these double headers on Monday night. It makes it impossible to watch both of them when they're both basically starting within 30 minutes of each other. Having said that, I would say that the Dolphins defense is playable. They're on the lower tier of playable defenses, though. I don't want to play them particularly because I think their defense is bad, and I think it will be bad against the Jets, with or without Justin Fields, who apparently logged a full practice on Friday, so he's probably going to go. But again, either way, I don't particularly want to play the Dolphins, but given that their offense they're playing is just not that good with or without Justin Fields, they are a playable matchup because they could get a turnover and hold them possibly to 17 points in this game. And the Jets defense, I got close to playing them. I'm not going to because the Dolphins have looked a little bit more efficient offensively over the weeks, and the Jets defense just isn't actually that good. They're dealing with plenty of injuries themselves defensively right now, so I'm going to stay away from the Jets defense until I actually see something good in fantasy football from them. And then the final Monday night game, again, I hate these doubleheaders on Monday night. Cincinnati at Denver. Now, this one is going to be a blowout, so it should be very easy to know that you play the Denver Broncos defense. The Bengals offense, I said this all week, they're not going to look as bad in future games against other teams, but in this game, they're going to look as bad. Like, this is not a good matchup once again. They're playing one of the best, if not the best defenses in the league. You've got to have Denver's defense in your lineup, and you stay far, far away from the Bengals defense. So let me know which defense you're targeting in Week 4 fantasy football. And if you want to see the full top 12 defense rankings for this week, click on this video right here.